Hi, everyone. Uh, Thanks for being here. Thanks for taking time out of your day to participate in this webinar. I'm really grateful to Dan and his team at DHRM uh, for inviting me to participate in sharing a topic that I am very excited about, very passionate about. It's been an integral part of my work and personal life for the past few years. Just a little bit about myself. I'm the Assistant Communication Director for the Department of Workforce Services. I have responsibility for internal communication and the department-wide employee training and employee development activities. And I've been with the department for about 18 years. And let me just give you a little bit of backstory before we jump into the actual content about where this originated. Many of you may or may not be aware of the Arbinger Institute. The Arbinger Institute is it's a company that's actually located here in Utah, but they provide global training and support and consultation, consultant work for organizations, private and public across the globe. And a number of years ago, our executive director's office asked myself and the director at the time of Human Resources, Bart Olsen, to pursue some additional leadership training to meet some challenges and some needs that we had at the time. And so the two of us did some research and we determined that we wanted to bring in-house this particular training, this developing and implementing an outward mindset. And so this has been a part of our leadership development training along with the other courses that are provided through DHRM and some other DHRM related training that we provide. This is required and mandatory training, 2-day training for all of our supervisors. We love it. It's been very, very beneficial, and we find that it adds great value and helps us a lot in our day-to-day efforts. And so I'm here to share just a very brief introduction with you about this particular topic. And so I'm going to jump in. One thing that you ought to know, a couple of quick disclaimers, all of the slides that I'll be sharing today in this training, they are proprietary to Arbinger's content. These are some of the slides that, as a certified facilitator, myself and Armin Drummond with DHRM, that we can share with our team. And so I wouldn't be able to share them with anybody, but if you're interested in more information about these topics, you can dig into any of Arbinger's books. These are all bestsellers, excellent books: Leadership and Self-Deception, The Anatomy of Peace, and The Outward Mindset. They're each great in their own right, and I really like, I read them regularly to brush up on some of these concepts because, I guess I struggle maybe more than others and have to be reminded. And so I appreciate the refresher. So I'd encourage you to take advantage of those. You can also go to arbinger.com, or if you have any additional questions about training that's offered or what you might be able to take advantage of as a state employee, feel free to reach out to me, Lance Olsen with the Department of Workforce Services. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into the content for today. And we're going to start by talking about why mindset matters. I'm going to define mindset and then describe and share with you how important it is that we take into consideration what mindset is and how it impacts the work that we do and the results that we achieve. So as you see there on your screen, let's assume that this circle here represents our current level of results. And the results that we're getting as an organization, or that could be the results that you're achieving as a team, or even as an individual. It really could be. But let's say that as an organization, this represents our results. What I think is pretty straightforward, we all understand, is that our results have been produced by our collective behaviors as an organization or as a team. In other words, the things that we do lead to the things that we achieve. A plus B equals C, we get that. Now, what we oftentimes don't talk about, though, is that undergirding and underneath all of these behaviors is this idea of mindset, that our behaviors are driven by our individual and collective mindset. And this, for the purposes of this training, I'm going to define mindset as this is how we see. It's how the way that we see challenges. It's the way we see our opportunities, our choices. It's really the way that we see other people. It's even the way that we see ourselves. The way that we see impacts the way that we behave, and those behaviors are what lead to our results. Okay, that's the foundation of what we're describing here today. Now, let's assume that as an organization or as a team, even as an individual, let's say that I have a new desired result, some sort of goal that I've set for myself. The question is, how do we achieve that goal? Well, oftentimes, this has been my experience for me personally. This is my own approach. And also, as I'm working with others, this has been my approach. It seems to me that the common approach is that we attempt to come along and prescribe behavioral changes that are necessary to achieve that target objective, right? So in other words, like in our organization, a lot of what we are trying to accomplish is dictated by our federal partners. So the federal partners come in and they describe, okay, these are the new performance expectations for the year. And so we kind of push down to everyone in the department, okay, these are your new performance expectations, and these are some of the things that you'll do to achieve that. Now, a follow-up question to that would be, what's been your experience with this? I mean, what's been your experience with this approach of prescribing behaviors in order to achieve a new desired result? Okay? Think about that for a moment. I don't know if your experience is terribly different from mine, but my experience is that oftentimes I find that this is not terribly effective. I find that maybe for a period of time I have compliance with myself and others. I find that sometimes we step in line, sometimes we see some adjustments to our behaviors, but over time, those things don't stick. That I struggle to get those things stick. This comes out of a report or research that McKinsey had done. It's a global research firm in 2014. And in this study, it's really interesting. You can go find this online. They indicated that organizations that identify and address pervasive mindsets at the outset are 4 times more likely to succeed in organizational change efforts than are companies that overlook this stage. So imagine that for a moment. If we are endeavoring to accomplish some new goal or objective, if we take the time to consider mindsets or pervasive mindsets of the individuals, of the teams, of the organization before we attempt to make that change, we can potentially be 400% more likely to be able to effectuate those changes than if we just jump into prescribing that behavioral change. So really, in order for us as an organization, as a team, whoever, to achieve this new desired result, we not only have to address behavioral change, very important, but we also have to address the underlying mindsets that inform and drive those behaviors. It looks a little bit more like this visually. Do you see that illustration? So as you notice there in that illustration, you see that we begin to address mindset, shift that mindset, and that behavior begins to follow. And that's been my experience personally, is that if I can find a way to shift my mindset, my understanding, appreciation, and way of viewing a situation or a person, then I find that my behaviors begin to follow. They're not necessarily instantaneous, but they do begin to follow. And I find myself achieving that result and it persisting, it's staying. We're going to look at an example, just an anecdote. This is an image of a gentleman by the name of Alan Mulally. Alan Mulally was the former president and CEO of Ford Motor Company. I'm going to show you a video clip here. And in this video clip, you'll find this is really, really interesting. It's just a clip from a video you can find online. He gave a speech at Stanford Business School of Graduates, or Graduate School. You get the idea. Graduate School for Business, I think. And in that speech, he describes this experience he had when he was first brought in by Ford. So Alan Mulally had been working for Boeing and had had great success there. Ford Motor Company, about 2007, was projected to lose $17 billion. I mean, just an astronomical amount of money. They brought Alan Mulally in because of his track record, and they'd hoped that he could transform their organization. One of the very first things that he did is that he instigated what is called a business plan review, a BPR. And in this business plan review, each week, the heads of all the departments would gather, and they were asked to come and present these charts. There was high-level charts that described the different businesses or projects that they had responsibility for. And in these charts, essentially, this is what it looked like. You had responsibility for this particular department, and in that, these were the major projects, and you were supposed to indicate or color code where you were with a project. If you were on track, it was green. If you had some concern or caution, there was something that was going on, it would be yellow. And if you were totally off track, it was red. So you were supposed to color code so you could just get an at-a-glance idea of where you were with that particular project or initiative. okay? So what he's going to describe for you here was his first experience of all of these new leaders. Well, they're not new to the organization. He's new, coming in with their charts and what he experiences. Now, what I want you to watch for in this video is you're going to see two different ways it's the two different mindsets. It's two different mindsets or ways that we can approach any challenge or opportunity. The first one I want you to watch for is what we refer to as an outward mindset. An outward mindset is one where we focus on the mission and the objective, okay? An inward mindset is where we're focused primarily on ourself. Metaphorically, in the material that Arbinger has written, they describe it as being in the box. It's a metaphor of being in the box. When I become self-focused, it's like I create or construct a box around myself, or I climb into this box, and that box begins to obscure my view and my ability to see clearly situations around me, people, circumstances, okay? So what I want you to do is watch for these two different mindsets at play.
Remember, I told you that within a couple of days, the forecast was we're going to lose $17 billion. So I started the business plan review. The charts are flowing, 320 charts. We even have them color-coded, red, yellow, green. Any change on the chart is in blue. So there's lots that doesn't change. All you're looking for is what has changed. You don't want to hear a long explanation about what's going on. What you want is that everybody knows the plan. Everybody knows the areas need special attention. So the color, you got the charts going, and it was about 3 or 4 weeks. The data's flowing, and all the charts are green. And I stopped the meeting. I said, "You guys, we're going to lose $17 billion. Is there anything that's not going well here?" Eye contact goes to the floor. Nobody says anything. I remember that culture you asked about. It wasn't okay to bring things up. I mean, it was command and control. People disappeared. So I think that another week went by and they were green. And of course, they got me. They got this new leader. What's this leader going to do? And so the next 2 weeks later, Mark Fields, who's the leader of all the Americas business, Canada, the United States, and South America, had an edge launch in Oakville, Canada. And they had an actuator issue on the tailgate. So he stopped production because we're going to be best in class. We're not going to deliver one vehicle unless it's done, and it's the best in quality. So he had like 2,000 or 3,000 edges, sitting out on the tundra. Thank God it was cold, so they weren't sinking in. Because when you stop production, I mean, it's a big deal. And so up comes his chart for the launch of this new edge, and it's bright red. And I mean, it got so quiet. You know what they're all thinking. It's over. Mark's gone. Gone. He's out of here. And then what's this new guy going to do? So I started to clap. Now they knew that was a sign. The door was going to open. Someone's going to come in. Mark's out of here. I could just feel it. I mean, and I said, "Mark, is there anything that we can do to help you with that?" And before Mark could say one word, Benny Fowler, who is the head of quality now worldwide, said, "Mark, I think I've seen that issue on a launch that we did 6 months ago." Because, in the car business, you have so much product coming out. I mean, this was so exciting. And then Joe Hendricks, at the time, he's the leader of all Asia Pacific now, was the head of manufacturing. He said, "You're going to need some manufacturing engineers, because as soon as you find that problem and fix it, you're going to have to change all those vehicles and get the production going again. I'll have our dynamite talent up in Canada immediately." And then Derek Kuzak, who leads product development worldwide, says, "Mark, I've seen that technical issue on such and such 5 years ago or something. I'll get right on that." That exchange took 12 seconds. 12 seconds. We went on to the next chart. Of course, it was green. On to the next chart, it's green. The next week, I think it was still red, Mark's chart. Everything else was green. Next week, I think he changed it to yellow because they found a solution, and now they're implementing it. I think the next week, it turned to green. And boom, all the vehicles started going. And then probably one of the most exciting days of my life, both from a oh shit. I mean, this is a terrible situation. Sorry, so sorry. My gosh, we're going to make it, was the following week. And guess what the charts look like? They look like a rainbow. Like a rainbow. And I'm going, oh my goodness. Now the data says right here why we're losing $17 billion. Because the data sets you free, right? Data tells you everything. But also now it was safe enough that you could share how it was. You weren't red. The issue you're working on is red. As a matter of fact, the expectation is that everybody really does know what the situation is, because you can't manage a secret. People can't help if you don't know what the real situation is.
Man, I love that example. I love, there's so much to unpack in that video, but we don't have enough time. I just want to identify a couple of things. First of all, I love his statement. You're not red. The issue you're dealing with is red. And oftentimes when we're in the box and we've got this self-focus, which I'm going to explain a little bit more here in just a moment, we carry that, man. The issue that I'm struggling with, that my team is struggling with, my agency is struggling with, we kind of wear it. It becomes who we are, and we think that we are the issue. We are the problem, and not that I'm a person with a problem. Notice the mindset that was at play. There's a lot of inward and outward at play, especially initially. There was this element of safety, that there were those who were trying to get an idea of where Alan stood. Is this something that they could open up about? Is this something that they could be honest about and vulnerable about? They just didn't know. And so that was a natural invitation for them to get in the box and to get into this self-preservation. And in many instances, they have tens of thousands of people that work under them. And so they might have been telling themselves, I'm just trying to protect the people in my particular department. Eh? And it wasn't until Mark was willing to focus on the overall mission and objective, it was him saying, you know what, there's just no way we're ever going to get out of this hole unless I'm willing to recognize that we've got this big problem and we can't fix it on our own. We need some help. And what was so cool, when he was willing to get outside of himself, to turn outward, and to focus on the mission and the objective, it invited others in the room to do the same. He said the interchange took, what, 12 seconds? It's fascinating that they could have sat in that room for weeks, all indicating that their charts were green, no problems, and they would have made no movement on reaching their goal of saving the $17 billion. And it wasn't until one individual was willing to be outward that it invited others to be creative and innovative and provide support and empathy and to step in and solve problems. It's just such a great example. So what we notice is that really there's this continuum that you can have organizations that maybe tend to be a little bit leaning towards the inward mindset and organizations that are a little bit more outward. And you can see visually what's represented here. I mean, an inward mindset organization is one where there's very little collaboration, coordination, there's very little innovation, there's not a whole lot of support. That's where the siloing exists, these departments that maybe don't cross over and communicate with each other. Contrast that with an outward mindset organization where there is that collaboration, that innovation, that creativity, the empathy, all that kind of support. So organizations fall oftentimes somewhere on this continuum. And I want you to think about for just a moment and ask yourself where you think, if 0 were an perfectly inward organization and 10 were a perfectly outward organization, where do you think that your organization falls on this? If you were to give them a number value, where would that be? I'm going to give you 5 seconds, maybe 10. Think about that, maybe even write it down. Okay, you have a number in mind? So just keep that number in mind. That's the first question I wanted to ask you. How would you rate your organization? The second question is, how would you rate yourself? Okay, so asking yourself, do I focus a little bit more on my own preservation and my own objectives and what I'm trying to accomplish, or do I focus more on the individuals around me, how I can support them, the mission, the objective? Okay, give it just a moment to think about that. Now, here's an interesting thing. So Arbinger, I've talked to a couple of people that work for Arbinger that run these assessments, and they've done this assessment, this organization and individual assessment for tens of thousands of individuals, and then they've kind of aggregated the score. You know, if you were here with you, I'd ask you the question, where do you think that most individuals rate their organization on this scale from 0 to 10? And the answer is most organizations rate their companies at a 4.6, okay? I don't know how close that was for you. Maybe you were more inward or more outward. Now, here's the interesting thing. Where do you think most individuals rate themselves? Well, the answer is a 6.8. Now, there's a couple of really important lessons that we can extrapolate from just this little bit of information. First of all, there's something that's really exciting that we can see from this. If most individuals rate their organization at 4.6, we can see that there's room for growth. There's opportunity, because there is no organization that is perfectly outward, no team that's perfectly outward, no family that's perfectly outward. There's always room for growth. Here's the challenge. It's the gap between where we perceive the company is and where we perceive ourselves to be. Think of an organization where everyone in the organization rates himself at a 6.8, and yet everyone in that organization rates the company or the agency at 4.6. Okay? You can see the math, how it doesn't work out, doesn't compute. That gap is what we refer to as self-deception. It's this idea that, oh man, yeah, my company, my organization, my agency really struggles with this. We've got lots of room for improvement, but I don't really contribute to that. It's all those other people. It's all those other weirdos on my team that contribute to this problem. That's what we're trying to address today. So we're going to dig in here just a little bit more. We've talked about these two mindsets, but I want to expand on them just a little bit so you understand how these come into play in our own personal lives and how it impacts the people around us. So to dig in a little bit more, let's assume that this is me, an image of me. When I have an inward mindset, or when I'm experiencing a little bit more of an inward mindset, others don't really matter the way I matter. That's kind of a function of an inward mindset. When I become self-focused, others don't matter like I matter. You know, others have needs, objectives, and challenges. Imagine the people on my team. Of course, they've been hired to accomplish a job. But when I'm inward, I don't really see their needs, objectives, and challenges. They just don't matter to me. And so I'm really just kind of oblivious to them. I'm blinded to those things. And my own objectives and behaviors become primarily self-focused. Now, a really interesting phenomenon occurs when I become inwardly focused. The individuals around me are less like people, members of my team, and more like objects. Okay? Now, that sounds pretty harsh. To objectify people around us, most of us don't feel like we ever do that. But let me give you three different ways that we objectify the people around us when we tend to turn inward. The first way is that we begin to see people as vehicles, meaning individuals that I can use in order to accomplish my objectives. Because remember, I'm primarily focused on accomplishing my own objectives. If I can't use you and you get in my way, then I might see you as an obstacle. Somebody that, man, I blame, that I get frustrated about and irritated because I can't do what I need to do. You're getting in my way. Now, if I can't use you and I can't blame you, then I just might see you purely as an irrelevancy, and I might find myself ignoring you. I mean, you think about any object, this chair that I'm sitting on, this chair is an object. I use it as a vehicle. Each day I come into my office, I sit on it so that I can work, or I might roll around the office or put something heavy on it. I use it as a vehicle to accomplish some objective. If it's in my way, trying to walk through the narrow walkway right here, if it's in my way, it's pretty normal. I'm going to push it out of the way. I'm not going to come back later when the chair has moved, because it's an object. It's an obstacle. It's okay for me to move it. And it'd be really weird if I came to my office each morning and the first thing I did is I walked around, talked to each one of my chairs. I asked them how they were doing. It's ridiculous, right? I wouldn't do that because they're objects. In that moment, if I don't need them and they're not in my way, I can disregard them. I can ignore them, okay? And yet, this happens with people all the time. Think of it. I mean, I'll give you three really quick examples that I thought about just even this morning. I thought about one that's been a recurring thought to me with my children. I have three children. I have a 15-year-old, 12-year-old, and a 7-year-old. And I find that as a father, there are times when I'm focused on trying to get the things done that a dad needs to do around the house, that it's too much. I just feel overwhelmed. And as a result, I utilize my children in such a way to accomplish my objectives. And yet I'm really sophisticated about it. I find myself saying the phrase over and over, hey, can you just do me a favor? Hey, could you help me out with this? Would you be willing to do me a favor? And yet I'm sure my kids just get sick of that. There are times if I'm not careful, I see them purely as vehicles that I can use to accomplish my objectives. Now think about an obstacle. Like I remember years ago, a time when I was trying to pursue some sort of an initiative. I felt really good about this. I felt like it could be really helpful to the team. I presented it to my immediate supervisor. My immediate supervisor didn't really see the value in it initially. Okay. And so what did I do? Did I try and talk it through with them? Come back later? Nah, I circumvented my supervisor and went to my manager. Now, can you see what happened there? In that moment, because I was so hyper focused on getting what I wanted, I saw my supervisor as an obstacle and I went around them. Okay. And now, irrelevancy, I mean, God, countless examples. I can think of one a number of years ago when I was a manager and I had an employee that worked for me that was nearing retirement. This particular person started getting pretty trunky. They had one foot out the door months before they retired. Okay. And I got pretty frustrated about the fact that they just would not engage and put forth their best effort. And rather than address it, I just got to this point where I was like, you know what, they're retiring. I don't have the time. And I began to really kind of just disregard and ignore that person. Okay. It's like, hey, they're going to retire anyway. We'll just make it work. Now, I didn't discover later on the impact this had on other members of the team. I had one of the other team members that approached me one time after they retired and said, you know, thoroughly unimpressed with the way that you handled the fact that this ... person disengaged so early, because it ended up offloading their work on us and we had to do more. And I was totally unaware of that because I was in my box. Okay. So that's an inward mindset. Now let's contrast that with what we refer to as an outward mindset. An outward mindset is quite simply this: others matter like I matter, meaning others are people to me. They have value just the way that I have value. Now, they might have different needs, objectives, and challenges, but their needs, objectives, and challenges matter to me. They're important. And when I do my work from an outward mindset, it means that I strive to align my objectives and behaviors in such a way that I support the objectives and the challenges and the needs of other people. It means there's times when I might back off because I don't want to get in people's way because I recognize it might not be helpful. Or times when I want to step up and I want to be more helpful because I know what's going on in their world and I want to help them accomplish their objectives. That's truly what it means to be outward. Really, in a nutshell, when I'm inward, I focus on my results. When I'm outward, I focus on our results. Both are focused on results, but notice the distinction. Whose results is really the key. Now, I'm going to show you a couple of quick examples, sports examples. Even if you don't like sports, I'm sure you can appreciate these two examples. The first one is the San Antonio Spurs. This is a team that, because of their coach collectively and for quite some time, they're a team that is very impressive in their way that they approach their work, very teamwork oriented, very collaborative, very outward is really what we're describing. So I want you to watch for examples of the individual players focusing more on the mission and the objective than on themselves.
Patty Mills in the last possession, beautiful bounce pass, a splitter on a dribble penetration. Seven to shoot. Diallo going to post up Dwayne Wade. Anderson comes to half. Diallo avoids. Spills to Green. Green fakes. Fires. Simple. His second rejection. Leonard now pulls up the other way. We have seen last couple of games just the versatility defensively of Kawhi Leonard. Green on splitter. Beautiful piece of Diallo on the finish. Excellent defense from Kawhi Leonard. Not the foul on that. Rebounding numbers, by the way, plus 16 for San Antonio. It is Miami's greatest weakness. Parker kicks it out. Leonard takes the three.
Yeah, I love it. So what did you notice about the San Antonio Spurs is you watch them the way that they play, you can see it, man. There's so much sharing. There's so much ball passing. There's so many opportunities where somebody has a great shot, and yet they recognize that somebody's better positioned for an even better shot. They move the ball constantly. They're positioning themselves to screen out and to block and to help their teammates get an open shot. I mean, they're focused on the mission and objective. Okay, it's super impressive. Now, let's look at a contrasting example here. While we don't normally focus on I wouldn't encourage you to focus on what we perceive as the inwardness in other people. It is sometimes important to see where we might potentially be getting in the way of other people. Now, this is an example of Real Madrid. Real Madrid, soccer team. Maybe if you don't appreciate soccer, you can see what's going on here. We're going to see an example of two players who they have the same mission and objective, but one of them appears to lose sight of the overall objective, and they become hyper-focused on their own and how they get in the way of a teammate, and it interferes with their ability to accomplish the goal and the objective.
Ozil on their own side, in behind with Gonzalo Higuain. Oh, can you believe that? Ronaldo got in his way, made to shoot, and between them they managed to miss the chance. Oh, that's an unbelievable faux pas. You can see that Ozil is definitely not offside. Higuain does everything right. Goes round Fernandez. Why on earth Cristiano Ronaldo has to get in the way? I'm not so sure, because if Ronaldo had have touched it, I'm sure he'd have been offside anyway. Bizarre, isn't it, from Cristiano Ronaldo? And I don't think he's accepting full responsibility for it just yet. Well, he has to accept full responsibility. Sometimes you've got to look in the mirror and ask yourself questions.
Love it. I don't think he's accepting full responsibility. Sometimes you got to look in the mirror. I mean, it's great. So I don't want to pick on, Ronaldo too much. I mean, although I don't think he really cares. He's a phenomenal soccer player. And yet what it appears as though there might have been a moment where he was inwardly focused on his objective, which was to score. And that's what he gets paid to do. But in that moment, a hyper focus on me and my own needs, objectives, and challenges might lead me to be unaware, the blinders of those around me and what they're trying to accomplish. I might actually get in their way. Isn't that fascinating? The same happens to us in our organizations. And a common question that comes out of this is, well, does that mean that as I'm listening to you and I'm kind of understanding what this inward and outward means, does it mean that an outward mindset means that I'm just going to go around and I'm going to just be helpful and try and be nice to everybody? And inward means I'm just going to be kind of mean and I'm going to be really assertive and aggressive about things. And that's simply not true. We don't have enough time. I'm going to skip through some of these, but there's really the reality is that I can engage in just about any behavior. Really, most every behavior can be done from two different mindsets. Okay. Let me repeat that. Almost every behavior can be done from both an inward mindset and an outward mindset. And on the outward appearance, it sometimes even looks the same. So imagine for a moment that I compliment somebody. I give somebody a compliment, but I have an inward mindset. What might that look like? What might that feel like? I might be saying all the right words, but on the inside, I'm thinking to myself, I really am just complimenting this person because I'm hoping that they'll compliment me back. That's why I compliment people on their hair, so that they'll compliment me back on my hair or the lack thereof, right? I mean, I might compliment somebody's work because I'm hoping that they'll recognize my efforts at work, right? The bottom line is, who am I focused on? I'm focused on myself. And even if I'm really sophisticated and subtle about that, the other individual can feel it. They can sense where my motive is, that inward mindset, focus. Now, imagine a compliment that's done from an outward mindset. It's one where I genuinely recognize and appreciate the efforts that person is making, what they've accomplished. I recognize the value that they add to the team and to my relationship with them, and I compliment them as a result. Okay? Really, just about any behavior can be done from an inward and an outward mindset. I'll give you an example. I had a boss who, he was a little bit more of an assertive individual and just kind of like spoke his mind. Okay? And there were times when I'm positioned down the office or down the hall from him, and he could just yell out, "Lance, come here." And I'd come running down to his office and he'd say, "Hey, I need you to do this, and I need you to do that. I need you to stop doing this and take care of this. Okay? Have that done for me by the end of the day. Send me on my way." Now, if somebody were standing outside the door and they were listening in and they didn't know what was going on, they'd be like, "Man, that guy, he's kind of a jerk. He's just really direct," right? And I can see how they might believe that. But the reality is, because I knew he was invested in me, because of our relationship, because of his outward mindset, because of our shared objective and our mission and what we were trying to accomplish, he could talk to me that way. And I knew that he was invested in me. Okay? Now, if he had been inwardly focused and he had been aggressive and taken that same approach, but I didn't know that he cared for me and my success, it would have been a very different experience. Can you imagine? Can you feel that? So almost any behavior can be done from an inward and an outward mindset. Okay? Now, I don't have time today, but I encourage you, if you get the opportunity, read some of the material from Arbinger, because they talk to us about this box more and why it's so detrimental to our relationships, personally, professionally, and how we begin to turn inward. Okay? As human beings, we have these natural senses to be helpful to other people. We have a sense and a desire that we can put ourselves out there to be helpful to others. And sometimes we don't follow through on that sense. We betray that sense, and it's a fascinating thing how we begin to see people as a result of that. But that's just an invitation for you to check that out a little bit more. What I want to talk about is the impact of this inward mindset, okay? Because that's really what it's about. We can spend here the next little bit talking, this 45 minutes or so that we're together talking about an inward mindset, and that's great. We learn about it, but if we don't understand why it matters and the impact it has, then it isn't beneficial. So let's talk about impact. I'm going to break it down this way. So inward mindset in our lives, being in the box, it doesn't always look the same. Matter of fact, in my own personal life, depending on the circumstance I'm in, it looks very different, okay? And so it's not necessarily easy to spot. That's sometimes why we call it this idea of self-deception. As a matter of fact, there are 4 really common ways that we find ourselves when we're inward towards others. There's 4 different styles of boxes that we carry with us, okay? I'm going to build those out for you here. And that foundation, it comes from this. As you see here on the slide, a quick reminder, a very important, very powerful principle is this, that when I'm outward, okay, when I'm out of the box, others matter like I matter. And that sounds very simplistic, but think of the world that we live in and think about how as human beings, we have a tendency to latch on to distinctions and differences and separate ourselves. We find everything that we can to create this competitiveness and this separation, right? Whether it's our titles at work, or how much money we make, or what we drive, or where we live, or our race or religion or political background, or whatever it is, we latch on these differences and then we create these distinctions, and we sometimes think that we're either more important or less important than others. But it's simply not true. We matter like other people matter, okay? Now, when we get inward, we tend to go one of 2 directions. Sometimes we begin to place ourselves above others, okay? And when I go inward, I find sometimes that I think that I'm better than, and that I count more than others. I don't actually say those words, but I find that sometimes my attitudes and feelings might reflect more of a better than. And because I'm better than, there's times when I feel like I deserve things that other people don't deserve, okay? Now, on the contrast to that, I might go the opposite direction. I might find that I place myself beneath others. And I find that I'm feeling a little bit worse than, and maybe I don't count like others count, especially if I find myself in a situation where maybe some do have more work experience or education or whatever. I might feel a little relegated, okay? Now, that doesn't pay well at work. I don't want to be walking around each and every day from this place of I don't count the way others count. So I find that I hang out a little bit more in this need to be seen as. I don't want to be seen as worse than, so I project this image, I put on this facade, I wear a mask to show people that I have value. I need to be seen as somebody who's valued in the organization, okay? Now, there's really common self-views and even feelings associated with these different styles. These are just examples, okay? The list could be, limitless about the different ways that we might feel, but in a better than style, you can see how I might see myself as feeling just more important or superior to others, and as a result, I feel disdainful or indifferent. You can see how also my self-view when I'm in an I deserve is I feel like I'm mistreated or just unappreciated on this team or in this organization. I feel resentful because of that mistreatment or lack of appreciation. I might feel like I'm worse than, so I feel broken or powerless. Just feel like I don't have any influence or control in this situation. Okay, just kind of resign. And then the need to be seen as, I sometimes feel like I'm being watched or judged. Okay, I experience maybe excessive amounts of anxiety or stress or just overwhelmed because I need to be seen as somebody who contributes, okay? Just some examples, but sometimes it helps me to look at those feelings and say, what are instances and circumstances, scenarios when I find myself feeling this way? And is it possible that I might be in one of these different styles, okay? Matter of fact, let me give you a few examples. Well, what I like to do with these different styles is I sometimes like to think of a common scenario or situation that I encounter. You can do this personally or professionally. And you can ask yourself, if I were to approach this scenario from one of these styles, what's it going to look like? Okay, so for example, I'll give you an example. Let's say that I have to have a difficult conversation with an employee about either a conduct or performance issue. Okay, so imagine that I'm a supervisor who tends to feel like I'm just all that. I'm just like, I'm the guy, I'm really important, right? And I feel like I'm just really put out because I have to deal with this performance issue again, right? You can see how I might get pretty impatient with the fact that I've given this feedback before. This is irritating that I even have to do this. I wouldn't say this to the employee, but it's what I'm feeling inside. Imagine what that does to the one-on-one. Imagine that interaction with that employee. Imagine what they're going to be feeling. Even if I'm saying all the right things, I have a smile on my face, they're going to feel that. Okay? And a close corollary to that is if I feel like I'm better than and I deserve better than this, it's like I might start telling myself a story that I just feel like I deserve better than this, man. I just feel mistreated because I've talked to this person before and they just continue this way. Why should I have to deal with this? And I start feeling pretty resentful. Okay? So you can see how that's going to impact this one-on-one conversation in our ongoing relationship. And more importantly, you can see how it's going to impact my ability to have any influence in this situation. Okay. Now contrast that with the opposite, which might be, let's say I go into this interaction with a worse than. Maybe I feel like I have talked to the employee before. They continue to do it. I'm just like, I don't know what else to do. I don't feel like I can do anything else. So I start feeling pretty deficient or broken or powerless. Okay. And you can see how I might come into this just like, I resigned. I don't know what to do. I'm going to talk to them about it. In all reality, if I'm in a worse than, chances are I'm probably going to avoid the situation. I'm probably not even going to approach the person about it because I'm really terrified that it's not going to go anywhere and we're going to end up with the same problem or worse. Okay. And then finally, you need to be seen as, what if I feel this anxiety that I need to address it, but I just don't really want to do that because I don't want to ruin the friendship that we have. Maybe this is somebody that I used to work with. We used to be co-equals and now I'm their supervisor. And now I was like, oh man, what is this going to do for our relationship or friendship? Can you see how that would impact my ability to give really good, clear, direct, and even difficult feedback? You could do this on and on and on. Think about a specific situation or challenge that you're facing as a supervisor and ask yourself this. In this particular situation, how might my inward style be impacting my ability to be effective in this relationship and in this situation? And if you need to start with thinking about some of those feelings, what are some of the feelings that you experience in this relationship or in this interaction? Start there. That helps you to identify the box. And then it begins to help you to step back and say, man, okay, so what kind of an impact is it having on this other person and on our relationship and my ability to have influence? Okay. These are the inward styles. Super helpful to write them down, to get an idea of what they look like in different circumstances and scenarios. It creates awareness. Okay. That awareness is the first step. If I can't recognize that I might be contributing to the problem, if I'm exacerbating the problem and can't see that I am, I don't even know where to begin. In that moment, I feel justified and I feel like, God, there's nothing else I can do. If this person would just stop being so difficult, then I wouldn't have to deal with this problem. Okay? The problem is always outside of me when I don't recognize that I have some contribution to the challenge that I'm facing. Okay? So, how does recognizing my inward styles help me to be a better leader? Creates that awareness, right? Now, in order for me really to make some headway, in order for me really to have influence as a leader, I have to begin to shift my mindset. One of the most effective and important things that every leader must do is to identify places in their life where they might be inward, focused primarily on their own needs, objectives, and challenges, and to begin to turn outward, to begin to understand, to begin to be empathetic about the situations that others are dealing with. And that empathy leads to more creativity. It leads to more ideas and more thoughts on how I can be supportive in helping my team to be more successful. Okay? That's the essence of what we're trying to accomplish here. Now, how can we do that? Well, let me give you one tool that I've found to be particularly helpful. This is the impact of shifting a mindset. I'm not going to have time today to show you this video. This is a gentleman by the name of Chip Huth. He's got a great story in the book, The Outward Mindset. I invite you to go check it out. Some awesome experiences that the Kansas City SWAT dealt with where they were so incredibly ineffective and there were all kinds of negative consequences of the way that they were policing, and how by Chip shifting his mindset as a leader, he's able to invite the others on his team to begin to shift, and how they begin to have an enormously positive influence in their community and in the way that they police. Okay, so that's an invitation to check that out. Skip through a few slides here for lack of time. Okay, but one of the big questions that is presented is, you know, if I'm truly outward, is it going to be okay for me to want others to change? And maybe that sounds like a trick question, but the answer is, of course it is. I mean, think about all the different circumstances, situations where we as supervisors have responsibility to help others be successful. When they're not, it's my job. It's my job to help that person to change. Okay? But when I'm in the box, I feel like the only thing that will contribute to improvement is that person changing. I don't see that there may be times when I as a supervisor can make some changes. Okay? So the move to an outward mindset is accomplished by learning how we ourselves first might need to make some changes, and then we can begin to help others influence them to change. And this simple tool is one of many that Arbinger provides to help us to begin make that shift. It's called the influence pyramid. I'm going to build it fast, give you a couple of examples of how this applies, and then I'm going to leave you with a few invitations. So these are the levels of the pyramid. First, the base of the pyramid is quite simply what you've heard me say several times: getting out of the box, meaning outward. It means improving my mindset as it relates to that person. How do I see this person? Am I seeing them still currently as a vehicle that I use, an obstacle that gets in my way that I blame, or somebody that just isn't important to me? I have to first address that mindset. I have to build a relationship with that person and others who have influence in their life. I have to listen and learn. I have to get an understanding of what really is going on in this person's world, and in their sphere. I have to take the time to teach and communicate, setting clear expectations. We've all heard these things before. And then there are instances and times when it's appropriate and essential for me to correct. Now, there's three really important lessons of the pyramid. When we're working this pyramid, from step number one or lesson number one is we work from the bottom up, meaning it's in a pyramid shape for a reason, because it demonstrates that most of my time, energy, and effort should be placed at the bottom of the pyramid. Okay? Getting out of the box and building that relationship. When I'm stuck at a particular level of the pyramid, say I'm trying to teach and communicate to an employee why they must fulfill or comply with certain expectations and just don't seem to be getting anywhere, the solution to that particular challenge is somewhere lower in the pyramid. I need to go down. I haven't listened and learned. I don't have the relationship. Maybe I'm still in the box. And then finally, ultimately, my effectiveness at any level of the pyramid depends on the lowest level of the pyramid. It depends on my mindset. So I can try and listen and learn, but if I'm still in the box, that means I'm listening and learning to an object. How effective am I going to be if I'm listening and learning, trying to listen to an object? You kidding me? I might even have all the most sophisticated communication skills and the most active listening capabilities. I might be, engaging eye contact and even repeating back some of the things that they're saying, all the things that we've been taught. And yet, if I'm still irritated with them, I'm seeing them just as an object, you can see how they are going to feel that from me. You're going to feel like I'm not really invested. I don't really care what's going on in their world. And there goes my influence. It drops. Okay? So the top of the pyramid, the correction, it's dealing with things when they go wrong. Bottom of the pyramid is doing behaviors that I can engage in to help things to go right. Most of my time should be spent in the lower levels of the pyramid. So this is an interesting thing that occurs, and I'm going to share with you an example of how I do this oftentimes at home. When I'm in the box, as you can see on this, the red example here, what do you suppose happens to the pyramid itself? Well, it inverts. Isn't this fascinating? Watch. When I'm in the box and I see people as obstacles, as irrelevancies, and as vehicles, and I'm trying to influence them, notice my air quotes, everything to that person oftentimes feels like correction. Even building a relationship sometimes feels like manipulation. Listening and learning is really more an effort to try and gather more ammunition to be able to use against that person, to try and justify my points and what I'm trying to communicate to them. And even teaching and communicating feels mostly like lecturing. Okay? In all reality, it just all feels like correction. That's how it feels when I'm in the box. Okay? And you can see how it can quickly invert when I go in the box. Okay. Now, let me give you a couple of examples how this comes into play. So the first one is a personal or work, and then I'll give you a personal one. Okay. So a number of years ago, as a manager, I had a supervisor that found themselves particularly frustrated with an employee. They felt like they had tried to address an issue. There was a chronic problem that was occurring. This employee was falling asleep at their desk, okay? And I don't remember all the details. They're pretty fuzzy at this point because it was a number of years ago. But this supervisor felt like they'd attempted to address these issues and felt like they hadn't really gotten anywhere. And so as we were talking it through, we came to the conclusion that what the supervisor wanted from me was to come and just meet with them, the three of them, and see if we could find a solution, figure out what was going on. Well, we met, and as we began to talk, I wasn't quite as invested in it. I didn't have the emotion. In other words, a different way to say that is I wasn't quite as in the box, okay? Nothing special about me. I just wasn't quite as attached to it. As a result, I felt like I was able to come into that situation a little bit more out of the box. And I started off in what I remember is some ways to try and build that relationship, and then started asking some questions. Notice I began to listen and learn. And what we determined from a few important questions was that this employee had been in a pretty serious car accident sometime before, and as a result, they had injured their back. And that injury to their back resulted in them needing to take some pain medication. That pain medication, interestingly, as you might know, side effect, drowsiness. So because of the pain medication, this person's falling asleep at their desk, okay? Now, am I suggesting in any way, shape, or form that it's okay to fall asleep at your desk, okay? I want that to be absolutely clear. Don't want anybody to reach out to me and say, hey, Lance said it's okay to fall asleep at your desk. Not saying that. No George Costanzas, no going under your desk. It wasn't okay for the behavior to continue, but now we understood the reason for the behavior. And we could truly have a healthy conversation about why it was necessary for us to come with some solution to fix that issue. We even had to get HR involved because it was more of an issue that was kind of beyond what we were capable of dealing with in that moment, okay? But until we were able to get out of the box, that solution had not presented itself. That flipping of the pyramid had not occurred. Okay. One other example. So as I mentioned, I have 3 children. I have my 12-year-old Clark. He's just awesome. This kid is so awesome. I love him to death. He's so fun. He's so happy. He's just one of the kindest kids. He's also diagnosed ADHD, and so he's super hyperactive. It's part of what makes him such a joy. But as a result, at night, rather than him getting tired, like many do, kind of winding down, he actually ramps up a little bit, gets more energetic. Okay. And so I remember one particular night, I'm trying to get him to go through the bedtime routine and been going at it. And I've been, as you can see in the pyramid, I've been correcting, and it's just not working. Okay. He's not listening. So I found myself at that point where I was like, Clark, just go to bed. And you could see it. He's just like, he kind of stops. Are you going to come tuck me in? Like, no, I'm not going to come tuck you in. I've been spending the past 30 minutes trying to get you to brush your teeth. Just go to bed. So he tucks his tail and he runs down the stairs. And then, of course, within seconds, how do I feel? I just feel like a total jerk. I'm like, oh man, I can't leave it like that. So I remember distinctly, I'm headed towards the stairs. I'm going down the stairs, and I remember it pops into my head. I'm like, man, I teach this stuff, this influence pyramid, and here I am, inverted pyramid, correcting, having no influence in my son's life whatsoever, even though I know getting to bed is important for him. So as I go down there, I remember, okay, all right, a pyramid's inverted. I just need to get out of the box, man. I'm seeing him as just this obstacle that I'm trying to push on. And he's not complying, rightly so, okay? Who wants to be pushed on? So I get down there, and I didn't really even bring anything up. He's so quick to forgive. I just kind of chat with him and chum, and he's just fun. We kind of joke around a little bit. And then I ask him a few questions. I say, hey, Clark, do you understand why it is that your mom and I want you to get to bed? It's just so important. And he says, yeah, I get it. And so he goes through the reasons. I know I need to get to sleep. I get sick, and I'm tired in the morning, and things are more difficult, blah, blah, blah. He gets it, right? And we're like, okay, cool. I mean, it was great. One of those quick bonding moments, not a big deal. I'll leave it at that. I go upstairs. I say goodnight. About 15, 20 minutes later, my wife comes upstairs and she says, he's not in bed yet. And I was like, what? And I had one of these moments where my pyramid inverted, went right back in my box. I was going to go down and correct. And she's like, no, hold on. Let me explain. I went in to check on him, and she says, he's sitting up in bed. And I said, hey, Clark, why are you not in bed? And he says, oh, he showed her. He had a little piece of paper. He had a little notebook there on his desk. And he had grabbed the little notebook, and he was writing a checklist of some things that he needed to do in order to stay on track so he could get to bed on time. Isn't that awesome? Now, I'm not going to paint this perfectly rosy picture and try and make you believe that everything has gone perfectly well at bedtime all the time. That's not the point here. But what was fascinating, think about this. Because I stayed out of the box, because of the relationship I developed with him, because of my efforts to listen and learn, because of my clear teaching and communication, I didn't even have to correct in that moment. He self-corrected. Matter of fact, I'm going to make a bold statement. As leaders, sometimes we think it's our job to hold people accountable. And I personally think that that's a misnomer. I think if we're constantly holding people accountable, I think we've lost our influence. I think we've really lost what it is to be a leader. To be a leader, what it really means is that I make the necessary efforts and I stay out of the box in such a way that I develop people who hold themselves accountable. Because really, in the end, that's the only way that it sticks, is if I can help others recognize the importance of holding themselves accountable and finding the joy and satisfaction in their job when they do so. Okay? So here's my few invitations for you. The first one is, for the rest of the day or for the rest of the week or whenever you're watching this recording, I want you to consider reminding yourself about the people around you, that they're people. People like you, who matter like you, have needs, objectives, challenges of their own. And be curious about those objectives and challenges. Think about how you can pursue your objectives, what it is you're trying to do. Think about how you can pursue your objective in a way that takes theirs into account and makes the adjustments necessary to support them. That's invitation really number one. They're kind of combined. The next one is, think of somebody that you struggle with, somebody that you have a hard time with, somebody that you just find yourself butting heads with. Somebody you might be operating from an inward style within this relationship. Consider which style you might be in. Better than, I deserve, worse than, or need to be seen as. Where do you hang out? How is it impacting your relationship? And then ask yourself, on that pyramid, what level do I need to spend more time? Do I need to spend more time developing the relationship with this person? Do I need to listen to them more? Have I clearly communicated expectations? Have I taught what's necessary for this person to be successful? Or maybe I need to go all the way to the base of the pyramid and just get out of the box. Okay? So that's my invitation. Be curious to what's going on in the world around the people around you, whether in the grocery store, on the road. It's a great way to practice this. We see obstacles everywhere on the freeway. Okay? Be aware of the objectives and challenges of the people around you. Okay? Be empathetic to their humanity. Okay? And then think of somebody that you're struggling with. Consider your inward style and where you might spend more time in that level of the pyramid. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch this. I look forward to any questions that you might have. If you want to know more about how our organization has incorporated the Arbinger's material into our leadership, feel free to reach out to me. It's a great complement to all of the leadership training that DHRM provides. There's no competition whatsoever. It just complements everything that we do. And it's so powerful. So you can go to arbinger.com to find out more. You can check out the books. Feel free to reach out to me. This recording is going to be available along with the 3 previous recordings that Rick, Dan, and JJ have provided. Awesome trainings that have been provided so far, and I look forward to future ones. As a matter of fact, Rick is going to be doing another one about virtual meetings that I'm particularly excited about because, man, all these meetings are virtual, and finding that I still am struggling with making them effective and making them really great quality experiences. So you can go to youtube.com/DHRM training to find those previous recordings. Once again, if you have any questions, reach out to me, Lance Olsen, or it's lnolsen@utah.gov. Hope you have a great week.